Great. Well, look, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Sam Mullins. I'm president of IATM. It's my pleasure to welcome you to our first webinar of 2022. This is something of a sort of experimental webinar, really, in that we're kind of keen to explore the idea of decarbonisation in museums. The IATM board is keen to know whether this is a subject area that would be useful to our members, particularly in transport and communications museums, but further afield as well, I'm sure. So we're going to kind of look at both ends of the telescope today, look at a detailed case study from of schools outreach on the environmental theme in London, as well as looking at what a museum faces in Lucerne, in the Verkehrshaus in Lucerne, the Swiss Transport Museum, on a much bigger scale, and then we'll have some questions and discussion afterwards. But leading us off on this and supporting this webinar are our colleagues from Mott MacDonald, who have been engaged very actively with London Transport Museum's own green journey, the first steps along the green journey in the last year, and have very generously offered to lead off this webinar for us. It's in some ways, climate change and decarbonisation of our organisations, it's such an enormous topic. It's a global topic. It's a national, it's a European, it's a continental topic. So it's really difficult, I think, for some of us to know kind of quite where to start with the language, where to start with just the sheer scale of our response to climate change and building a more sustainable city, more sustainable future for our cities. It's been likened to, the challenge of eating an elephant. You have to do it in small, bite-sized chunks, or else it becomes very indigestible. So we're going to look at that in our introduction today, in particular, and we're going to look as well at our host organisation, Mott MacDonald, who have indeed decarbonised their own activities in 2020. So it's my great pleasure to hand on now to Neil Henderson from International Engineering Development Consultants, Mott MacDonald, to lead us through some of these important definitional questions. To Neil, or is it to Katie?
No, it's to me, Sam. So thank you very much, and welcome everybody. It's a real honour and a pleasure to be here today. And we've been Mott MacDonald have been a corporate partner of the London Transport Museum for many years, and we get a lot of energy from the museum, and we're always looking for ways in which we can pay back some of that energy that we get from the work that the museum does. So what I'd like to do today is just really share with you some of our experiences along our journey, and it is very much a journey to decarbonise, to use a transport pun. But clearly, we feel that we started on this journey. We'd like to share with you some of our experiences, and maybe as Sam was saying, maybe just put a little bit of simple context to what this is. So we'll. I'm joined by two of my colleagues who I'll introduce shortly, but we're going to go through. I think we've got around about 30 minutes just to step through our journey, and then I start to ask some questions of you about what, as members of museums, what things do you need to consider, and how can you influence the choices you make along this journey, and then again there'll be some questions at the end. So if we could go to the next slide, please. I'll just do some brief introductions. So I'm a key account director within Mott MacDonald. I work within our transport business. As Sam mentioned, we are a global transport, a global business, but transport is a key part of that business. It probably accounts for more than 40% of our global business. I'm also joined today by Kim Yates, who's our UK and European regional sustainability leader, and Katie Chesworth, who is our sustainability leader for our transport unit here in the UK. And both have been very actively involved in Mott MacDonald's journey through decarbonisation. So if you just next slide, please, Katie. So we have a very strong purpose of our business. We are one of the very few global employee-owned businesses left in the world, but that really helps us form a very long-term view of what we want to be as a business. So because we're not beholden to banks or external shareholders, we all have a stake in the business. We really want to sort of look at our long-term view and purpose, and a key to that is actually how do we improve society, and we really focus that around excellence, innovation, and transforming our clients' businesses, and more importantly, the communities and employees that we have. And a key part of that is being a sustainable business and providing opportunities for our clients and our communities to improve their lives through decarbonising cities, reducing air pollution, and all the associated benefits that we get through decarbonisation. So if we move on to the next slide, please. Just a short one, just to give a bit of context. So as I said, we work globally, and if we just click through the next couple, there we go. So yeah, we work in 135 countries around the world, and have 170 permanent offices. So we have a real global footprint. And when we talk about decarbonisation and when we talk about improving communities, it really is, we have people, local people working in all of these locations. Our 16,000 people working around the globe. So next slide, please. So I'm going to hand across now to, I think it's Kim.
Oh, it's me. Yes.
Yeah.
Hello.
So, I'll leave you to take it from here.
Right. So just as a little bit of background is that I'm a carbon expert. I've been working in the field for donkey's years, way before it became very, very fashionable, because I think everybody's talking about decarbonisation now. And I'm just going to trot you through, what does it actually mean? We keep on hearing this word carbon. So if we go on to the next slide, please. So when we're carbon footprinting something, it's not rocket science. If you have an activity like you're burning gas in a boiler, you're switching the light on, you're driving your car, any activity has an associated emission factor, carbon emission factor associated with it. So you just take the amount of that activity that's taking place and then times it by that emission factor, and that will give you your carbon footprint. So it's all sounds quite simple, doesn't it? It does get a little bit more complicated than that, but that's the basics of carbon footprinting. And when we're decarbonising, we measure the carbon footprint and then we look for the reduction coming through. So if we move on to the next slide. So you can see up here, it's got slightly more complicated now. So in carbon world, we talk a lot about carbon, but actually what we're talking about are greenhouse gases. And there's 6 greenhouse gases that are associated with that. And oh, look at that, I've got 7 there, but we won't worry about that. But the main ones are carbon dioxide. That's what everybody talks about, and that's what everybody worries about. But also you have methane, you hear about cows and and meat being having a big impact on climate change. You have N2O, which is nitrous oxide, and that is emitted from soils and things. But you also have things like hydrofluorocarbons. Hydrofluorocarbons are the replacement for CFCs. If anybody remembers that in the 1970s with the ozone hole, that the ozone hole was being eaten by the CFCs, they're the replacement for them. And unfortunately, their global warming potential, i.e. the amount that they heat up the earth, is much, much greater than just CO2. And then you have perfluorocarbons and sulfur hexafluoride. The HFCs, PFCs and SF6, they are all man-made. But the other ones are more natural. Then we start to talk about scope 1, 2 and 3. I also need to take a step back, that when we do a carbon footprint, when we're talking about carbon, we actually mean all these greenhouse gases. So you'll hear greenhouse gases, carbon, it's one and the same thing. Then we talk about scope 1, 2 and 3. Scope 1 is anything that you're doing within your facility that is directly burning carbon dioxide. So that is, again, gas boilers. If you've got company vehicles, that's your scope 1. It also includes, if you've got air conditioning, for example, you will get emissions of the hydrofluorocarbons. So that is also termed as a scope 1. Then you go into scope 2, which is quite nice and easy. You switch your light on, your coal-fired power station is emitting carbon dioxide further on down the line. That's called your scope 2. And then we come into the great world of scope 3, which are indirect emissions, things that you don't necessarily have direct control over, but because you are doing something, you are getting these scope 3 emissions emitted. So it's like employee commuting. In your case, your travellers coming to see you. You've got no direct control over the emissions that they're doing coming to see the museum in the first place, but you have some form of influence. So that's setting a bit of the background. So I'll just skip on to the next bit. So again, I've set the scene for this. We also hear a lot about carbon neutral versus net zero. When this first came into play, net zero is a very, very recent term, and there's been a lot of argument behind the scenes about what it actually means. But when we say carbon neutral, we are not adding any more greenhouse gas emissions into the atmosphere. You need to reduce and then you can offset. Now, you can offset with things like removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, but you can also offset by, for example, cooking stoves in developing countries, because you're avoiding those emissions. When you look at net zero, on the other hand, it's much more all-encompassing, and every activity that you're doing must be pushing down carbon dioxide, must be pushing your carbon all the way down. So that you're reducing carbon, and as part of your activities, you're reducing the carbon of your supply chain, of your visitors, etc. And that all forms part and parcel of your net zero. What you can't reduce, you have to remove from the atmosphere by offsetting, carbon capture storage, or whatever you want. So that's a very, very potted history of what it all means. So if we quickly skip on to the next one, because I'm aware that there are Katie's going to come on in a minute. So what I'll do is I'll talk you through what we've done as a company. So if we go on to the next slide. So we became carbon neutral in 2020 as a global company. So I'm going to talk you through that. And that's part of our journey to be net zero by 2040. You see, we use the two different terminology. So the carbon neutrality relates to what we can control as a company. And when we're talking about net zero, that's a much, much bigger conversation, because we're looking about how we can influence our supply chain, people external to us, as well as the projects that we're working on, because we work on massive projects across the world. And how are we helping them to reduce their carbon and be on that trajectory? So if we move on. Now we're very lucky because we've been monitoring our carbon footprint since 2008. I've got the results from 2012 onwards, and as you can see that we're on a steady trajectory on the way down, which is really, really good. But you'll see in 2020 we've expanded the scope of our emissions. So we're now starting to look at and reduce our emissions associated with people working from home. And bearing in mind, we've been in the COVID world. This is really important, and also looking at what we're purchasing again as a global company. But overall, we're on that downward trajectory, and it's in line with what's termed as science-based targets. We're on our way. So if you move on. Okay, so there you go. But I suppose the most interesting one for us is, as everyone knows, we started working, home working in abundance, again, on a global basis. We are now taking that into account into our footprint. The guidance says you don't necessarily have to, but we're now doing that. And you can see here some of the differences we get across the world. So on the whole, home working has actually decreased our carbon footprint, is the easiest way to put it. But in NASA, with our American colleagues, what we've seen is the home working has actually pushed it up, which is quite an interesting thing to look at, because we're working as a global organization and each region is different. So if you move on to the next one. So the practical things that we've put in place to achieve net zero is improving our carbon management processes, expanding it, and again, reducing it all the way down. Where we can, we're exchanging, well, in the UK, we're going to 100% renewable energy. When we're looking at offices in India, for example, this is much, much harder to do because most of their grid is from coal-fired power stations. But again, it's looking at what we can do within that context to reduce our carbon. 46% of our carbon footprint, when we're not in a COVID world, is attributed to flights. And so there is a lot of work going on behind the scenes about how we change the way that we work together. And again, actually, COVID has helped because we can show that we can have a conversation, we can continue our business in a virtual world. And again, if you have a look here, it's looking at ways to influence the way that we're buying our computers, our services, etc., further on down the line for that low carbon choices, and helping our staff on that low carbon journey. We're continuing to offset, and we're looking at ways, again, within our company that we can incentivize low carbon choices all the way through. And of course, we're externally verified. So we're not just saying that we're carbon neutral. We are audited by the Carbon Trust on a yearly basis to say, okay, your carbon footprinting is right, and you have achieved carbon neutrality, and we're signing up to be net zero as well. That external verification is really important. So if you trip on, and I will skip through the rest of it. So again, any buildings that we own, we're making sure that they're on the net zero trajectory, and we've committed for our building portfolio to be net zero by 2030. Next. Carbon Neutral You was launched last year, and it's about influencing our 16,000 staff, how they in their personal lives can become carbon neutral and making it easy for people. So if we move on to the next one. And as I said, flights are in normal times are our biggest issue with carbon footprinting. So we're looking at reducing, that's the main thing, but also looking at influencing the aviation industry in terms of sustainable aviation. So we're looking at purchasing sustainable aviation fuels to try and kickstart low carbon aviation. So everywhere we've got an influence. So next. And last but not least is our offsetting. So the offsetting that we have chosen removes carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, but it also has much, much wider benefits in terms of improving job prospects, protected species, etc. And it was also accompanied a project that we've been technical advisor for the past 15 years. So it's something that we personally were invested in. So hence, that's the reason we chose that offsetting. So if we move on to the next one. And of course, in our projects, we have been working in this space to reduce our impact on the projects that we work on. We work on very large infrastructure projects, and we've been working in this space for quite some time. We published the Infrastructure Carbon Review in 2013 with Treasury in the UK that showed cut carbon in your capital projects, cut cost. That went on to be the PAS 2080 standard that again shows that's all about carbon management in infrastructure where we have a lot of influence. And of course, we're working on net zero infrastructure schemes, and this is transportation schemes in particular. So if we move on. I'm going to pass you across to my colleague, Katie.
And instead pick up where we left off, which was where you need to consider. What you need to consider is, as museums, in terms of you wanting to decarbonise, to be more sustainable, to be on that journey to address climate change. And I think actually what was said earlier by both Neil and Kim and also Sam about being on a journey is important here. Don't be too daunted about how big a task it is for you as a museum. You can make really good, big changes by small steps. Think about what you can do in the next 6 months, in the next year, and build from there. Now, I think it's important to say that the first thing that you will need to do as a museum or another organisation is to understand the scale of the problem you have in terms of carbon, which is why it's so important to, first of all, measure your carbon, as Kim was saying, do that carbon footprinting or whatever process you're going to go through to understand how much of an impact you're having on the climate as an organisation, either in the scope 1 sense, so you're building your organisation, your staff, or thinking in a wider sense, for example, your visitors. And we can see here, just using the London Transport Museum as an example, some of the things you might need to think about are the energy that you use. So your electricity, your gas, for example, the waste as well that you create, not just in terms of the waste you create and how you get deliveries, another important thing that should be sharing again now, and also your staff travel. So your deliveries is something you can really make a difference on, but your staff travel, that is working with the people who work for you to think about how they get to and from work each day. Goods and services, so how you're getting deliveries, but also what you're using from those deliveries. And visitor travel is a big one. So as a transport museum, people will be coming to visit you. How are they getting there and back, and how you can influence that? And that refers back to what Kim was saying earlier. You can have more of an influence on, for example, how you power and provide energy to your building. You can have less of an influence on how people come to and from it, but you can make some impact on that. Just for example, by talking about public transport first on your website when you give people directions on how to get there, rather than first of all saying how to get there by car. That's just one small thing that you could do to try and encourage people to travel in different ways. And offsetting's on there too. So that's the last thing that you would think about. When you've done everything else that's possible, there will still be some carbon left. And for that, you might want to consider an offsetting scheme. So in terms of what you can influence and the choices that you can make as organisations, there's a carbon reduction hierarchy, which is what I was just talking about. So first of all, What can you avoid creating carbon in the first place for? So for example, if you are working from home, you're not going to be getting in that car or in a train or any other form of transport at all in the first place. So that travel carbon is reduced completely, although there is other carbon from working from home. You can reduce as well. So using that example of traveling, you might decide, if you're not working in the museum every day, that you could work from home. You don't have to be in the office. You could work from home part of the week. You might want to substitute, and using the same example there, that would mean changing from a car to maybe sharing a car with one of your colleagues who lives nearby, maybe getting on a bus or a train or a tram, or the most sustainable thing to do would be to walk or cycle. You might also want to compensate. So if you have no other option but to travel by something that creates carbon, that's when we come into the offsetting. Wanted to talk you just through energy and transport quickly, noting that we're a little bit over time, but we have had a little bit of a pause. So examples of energy where you might want to reuse and to think about how you can use energy. Avoiding and reducing, we talked about a minute ago, so efficiency is a part of that. So not just how much energy you're using in the first place, if you can reduce that, but also making sure you don't lose energy through your building. So insulation being really important there. And then substitute and compensate. So for example, clean energy. Can you change the provider that you use so that you're not having energy coming from coal, for example? Could you consider on-site generation? Is there a wind turbine you could put on your roof? Is there somewhere, different organisation, London Transport Museum as an example, your city centre location, you probably don't have a lot of room for a big solar farm next to you. You could put solar panels on your roof, but there are other options depending on what organisation, what museum you are and where. In terms of transport, same thing again. How could you avoid and reuse it? Home working we talked about, but also efficient procurement. So can you change the way that you as an organisation buy things so that it all comes together? So you're not having 3 people ordering 3 different deliveries of the same thing in the space of a week, but you bring those all together into one delivery, so less journeys are being made and less carbon. You could substitute and compensate by having less cars in the first place. That's a really important one. Cars are the biggest problem in terms of transport and carbon, although obviously many countries are moving to electric vehicles, which reduces it a bit. You could have electric car charging in your car parks. That's not just good for the fact it provides the car park charging, but it also is a message you're sending about what's important to you as a museum and what you believe in and what you encourage. You could have travel deals. So you could arrange that for a visitor buying a ticket, there could be a reduced ticket to train travel at the same time as part of that, to give them a bit of a deal that you can arrange with your transport operator. So there's lots of different ideas there, some of which we call carrots and some sticks. So some things which encourage people to do things and other things that sort of nudge them along to do it. In terms of the order of what's important there in terms of what you can influence, you influence your employee travel most of all. You can probably, goods transport would be next, and visitor travel is the one that you can least influence, but you can still make some big influences on that visitor travel, which is that scope 3 emission that Kim talked about earlier. Within transport, so alongside being the transport sustainability lead, I developed transport schemes across the UK and beyond. When we talk about behaviour change, encouraging people to do things, we talk about the 4 R's. So first of all, reducing. So reducing the amount of carbon that you're creating in the first place. Secondly, retiming. So for example, when can you take your journey at another time of the day that might mean that there's less vehicles on the road at any time? Could you change the mode, so remode? That means moving from a car into a train, or a train onto a bus, or a bus onto a bike, or maybe part of your journey could change so that you're not making the entire journey by car. And rerouting is a part of that too, so changing the route that you take and changing the mode that you're using through that too. And the last thing I wanted to talk to you about was reputation. This is not just a good thing to do because it's important for the climate and it's important for the environment. It's not just important because you may well live in a country and work in a country where you're asked to contribute towards reducing the effects of climate change through the operations you have as a business, but it changes the reputation you have, and you're in such a unique, good position as transport museums because you're showcasing transport, both the past of transport and the future as well. So the past of transport has had some sustainable modes, some not so much sustainable. You can showcase the future of transport through the work that you're doing as well. As we were saying, electric charging in your car park could be a way to do that. It helps you as an employer as well, particularly if you're employing younger people. They're more likely to want to work for a company which is sustainable, which is concerned about the climate and is a good citizen to the country that it's in and the area it's in. It shows you're walking the walk as well as talking the talk, which is a phrase we have in England where we want to ensure you're not just saying this is a good thing, but you're really doing it in practice. You're inspiring the next generation, really important for you as transport museums, because you have that next generation coming into your buildings every single day. How can you show them that they can be a part of the future through the way they're traveling every day in terms of addressing climate change? Citizenship, really important there. Hopefully when you're working as museums, you're thinking about the city that you work in or the wider country and how you can play your part in being a good citizen for them. And obviously, as I said at the beginning, there is regulatory and legal requirements that you will want to meet, and it's really important. So if you can see that for you that's coming, it's a good chance for you to get started now thinking about how you would want to decarbonise. So I think that is probably the end of Neil and Kim and I having the different things to say on this. We wanted to ask you all where you are on the journey. So it might be a little bit tricky given we've now got a problem with muting ourselves. I don't know whether we have a hands up function or something, but perhaps you'd like to share with us how you as organisations have started to think about decarbonising and what problems and issues you might be having, or some good ideas and successes you have that each other could learn from each other. Emma, I don't know whether that's possible to share, or we could just move on to this and into the next agenda item if we can't do that today.
Katie, if you could unshare the screen, then we could see everybody.
That's a good idea.
The settings have been changed now, so anybody can unmute themselves.
Okay,
thank you,
good.
Emma.
Thanks. Anyone with want to say where they are on this particular journey in that framework which Katie's just outlined, or a question for Katie? I think the thing that resonated for me in particular, Katie, was the sense that we do have an important role as forums for informing public opinion in our educational work with learners of all ages. So we have a kind of obligation, I think, to talk this talk, but of course I don't think you can do it if you can't also demonstrate that as an organization you're walking the walk yourself already. And that's something that we've certainly taken on board at London Transport Museum, well, with your assistance, of course. So we've started with looking at that whole panoply of energy, waste, building, deliveries, and so forth that you went through. We've looked at packaging in the museum shop, look at the air miles of where it's been imported from, and so forth. So we're beginning to kind of work that into the organizational DNA. And I think there's one of the things that I'm very keen on is that when we do something like that, we include that in our interpretation, in what we say to our visitors and our users. So if you pick up something that is sourced from recyclable packaging these days, you get used to looking for the logo and so forth. You should also be encouraged that what's inside the package is as good as what's on the outside. So walking the talk and explaining, I think, why someone can't have a plastic bag or why you're charging for one, from the really sort of small steps like that up into bigger programs and exhibitions that we typically do. Okay.
Yes, certainly we feel, Sam, working with you and your colleagues, it's really good to see that you're considering all of those things. And like I said, you don't need to be net zero by the end of this year. You just need to have made a start and be thinking about all those different ways that you can make a difference. I think what you will find when you're doing that is there are some things that are easier to change than others. And that's no bad thing. Do the easy things first, gives you time to plan how to do the things that are more difficult.
Yeah, I think, and I mean, this might be for Kim really, but the language of carbon, the kind of understanding of how how you calculate, and when when you do something, what is its net effect, is something which we're used to using the language of money for for cost benefit. You almost need a sort of carbon benefit analysis. I don't know if there are tools available for that.
So actually, if I think I touched on it a little bit when we spoke previously, is that if you're spending money, normally you're spending it on your electricity, your gas, etc. So they're very, very intrinsically linked. And what you're seeing across the piece is that, yes, you're looking at your cost reductions as you're trying to get more efficient, but you're also looking at your carbon reductions at the same time. They're very, very closely linked to what you're doing.
So generally, there's a business case for decarbonisation.
Very good business case. It's a bit of a no-brainer. So.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. Any other questions before we move on? We're going to be pushing our time envelope a bit, but hey, this is an important question. Okay, Martin, should we move across to you? Martin's a really good friend and colleague from IATM, and he's going to introduce the way this problem or this opportunity plays out for the Swiss Transport Museum and the Verkehrshaus in Lucerne. Martin, great to have you with us. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Sam. Thank you, everybody, for being here at this webinar of IATM. It's a great pleasure to give an input, some insights about the situation here in Switzerland. I'm really happy with the presentation, especially for Katie. I'll tell you how we use these ideas on model split and how people travel to our place, put this new topic into kind of a new business model, actually. So I would like to start my presentation. I hope sound is okay.
Yep.
It's okay.
Good.
How do we decarbonize our Verkehrshaus? The Swiss Museum of Transport. Verkehrshaus means just the house of mobility in German. Next slide, hopefully it works. It was a bit sleep.
68 Kilo Alpha, wind 230 degrees, 6 knots, runway 28 clear for takeoff.
First, I would like to give you just a 1-2 minute introduction about Swiss Museum of Transport. It was founded in '59 on a lovely place on the lakeshore in the heart of Switzerland, nearby the city of Lucerne. Now, if it looks like this in the other direction, in the far end, you see the city of Lucerne, and we are by far the most visited museum in Switzerland. We're covering all modes of mobilities, and so we have a wide range of opportunities to invite guests to share with us the great topic of mobility in all disciplines. I would like to focus you on this red bubble on the right side of the slide. If you would be here in person at the moment, you will see a big building area. Here we are building the house of tomorrow, because we are taking this topic of decarbonizing the museum also as a new topic in our whole museum, and would like to have a special exhibition on this topic in a new building. Here, just some facts and figures. In a normal year, without COVID, we sell about close to 1 million tickets. We are an association, we are not state-owned. We have close to 38,000 members, our fans, and I've got 240 employees and about 86 in the gastronomy as well. We are highly self-financed, so we have to be very open in collaboration with private industry as well, and use us as a platform for new topics like CO2 and new environmental topics. That's our DNA. That's just, before COVID, actually, our entrance hall on a rainy day in Switzerland looks like this. But I would like to focus you shortly on this little picture on the right side. I have 16-year-old trainees on the payroll and up to 72-year-old highly experienced men and women. They bring a lot of lifelong experiences in the house and also guides, and so are really, really important. 56 years of experiences. We try to give a great experience to our guests. Katie also told that school classes, that's the future. We're really hard focus on school classes. I just got the figures a day ago from 2021, where during COVID, we had even more. We had over 3,100 school classes at the Swiss Museum of Transport, and there's decarbonization, zero CO2 discussion, things like that. We have to do this with the kids and families to bring these topics on the family tables at home. That's the reason why we started already 4 years ago to plan and build a new building. We call it the House of Tomorrow, with a special facade, with solar panels on the roof and at the side as well. And that will be the home of these topics, but for sure it will have hands and angles in all direction, in all different halls. But we thought it's a good idea to have a nucleus where people can get really in contact to do hands-on things with these climate topics. I've just show you some slides about to show how we think. If you put mobility in the center, it's highly connected with environment, society, and also technology, and a lot of other things. But we just picked out those three, and our exhibition, but also a living lab we're going to construct will mainly focus on those three topics. Technology is a really nice issue for transport houses. We can do test driving with new cars, electric, H2 driven cars, lorries, and give our guests the opportunity to get in contact with these new ways of mobilities and things like that. But it's also a nice issue for industry, startup, and university partners to invite them to show in this House of Tomorrow on what they are working and which effort they already put into research and renewable energy. The next topic is environment. That's we already heard about this topic. In Switzerland, we have to focus on net zero by 2050. So we would like to educate our guests in a easy and good mode to get a bit more in touch with this important topic, and not in a way of pushing them and saying then don't, just to offer them new ways of mobility and also ways of thinking to change their habits in their whole life. And the last sector as well is a multi-model world, and the whole society, and that's also for school classes. We're already planning to develop with teachers some new books, some new video clips to teach this important issue at school, and then they are able to travel to Lucerne, to the Verkehrshaus, and have the opportunity to do some hands-on stuff. We are just 2 days ago with the university, we're actually planning to build a little car with a solar cell on it, and that all kids, all ages can build it here and bring it home and say, Mommy, Daddy, it's sunny outside, let's try the Verkehrshaus car or whatever it will be at the end, and it moves. So they learn. We found out that 10-year-olds they just see these solar panels on glossy roofs, but they have no idea what's actually can have for an impact. And so we have to break it down academically right into little pieces to give them home to bring something home after the visit at the Swiss Museum of Transport. Here, just a chart about why energy and transport. My board also, yeah, normally you show airplanes and all the new cars, but why energy? There's just a lineup. It's actually fully connected with all mode of mobility. Even if you are hiking, you need the kind of energy, some food bars and things like that. New petrol, artificial energy forms and things like that. And the last sentence really important: children and young people. Our museum's key target group are those most impacted and major issues for addressing this new energy strategy. Those are actually, they have to look forward, and we have to give them some tools and ideas and inspire them to help turning the world. And I'm quite happy that Switzerland Tourism, they are actually the marketing organization. That's the reason why they came out with a new label. Marketing people always love labels. I'm personally not so a label fan, but then you can have 10 stamps on your entrance door, and if you do nothing afterwards, then it's just a label. But this one is quite nice. It's a combination of Switzerland and sustainable, Swiss-stainable. And then everybody, especially tourists and museums and hotels, whatever, can show what they are doing and get 3 different stages. One is just committed. You just do some analysis, and then you can be engaged after a certain level. Things changed in the restaurant, whatever, and then you can get up to leading. And I would like to show you just a short film how we try to push tourism partners, not only museums, to be part of this program.
How far we've come. Our curiosity has taken us around the planet. We've traveled over land, water, and through the air with fire in our hearts. We used to travel to arrive. Now we travel for its own sake. Here in Switzerland, we've created endless hiking trails, spectacular bridges, and built cable cars that reach the highest peaks. We've always cared deeply for nature. Our love for nature is in our DNA. Sustainable travel comes naturally to us. What others see as a distant goal, for us, comes as standard. It's time to give this standard a name. We call it Swiss-stainable. Swiss-stainable stands for excellence. Swiss-stainable serves as a blueprint, because we know that when nature is left untouched, the more it can touch us. And that's something worth preserving for generations to come. It's time for a new way of traveling. Over land and water, through the air, with plenty of fire in our hearts.
That's just the way how we look for new members to enter this program. But back to my side here, the Swiss Museum of Transport, we would like to be in the near future a platform for communicate the strategy of the Swiss Energy Strategy 2050, have trainings, laboratory for students, and a lot of options. The goals become the energy sector hub in Switzerland. We are really high goals, hosting the Swiss Energy exhibition and a lot of new things. We have our own energy foundation. We created a foundation where we are invite industry partners, academic partners to have a high level of knowledge in my house. There will be a new exhibition. I already mentioned it, 600 square meters, roof about 7 meters high, will be open in April 2023. And we are now gathering together all partners, starting with creating the new platform, and are really thrilled actually to be an active part on this issue. Mainly we focus it actually on mobility. That's our topic, but we also try to cover it to involve the restaurant as well, the shops and things like that. Because one thing we found out, and that's actually the summary, we have an expression here in Switzerland: before you try to be an expert, you have to clean in front of your door. And so we have to change our energy system in our whole house. The house of tomorrow will have a new heating and cooling system that's 90% CO2 free, because we are using lake water for to cool and warm. We need just a small boiler for gas if it's really cold. And that's really important because since 2 years actually, we have this label trying to reduce carbon and things like that. And one feedback you get, the customers are really aware of this topic. If you do some mistakes or you do something not, you really get bad remarks and feedbacks. We had an air show since 10 years over the Lake Lucerne, and 5 years ago, only few people said it's loud and it gets pollution. And in this year, I get about 20 mails and said, Martin, what you're doing against, how do you compensate the CO2? So that means if you're starting this journey, you have always look at your personal carbon print, and otherwise you get a hard feedback from the audience. But it's really fun, and I can tell you, we had a hard time actually in funding money for turning an old locomotive or an old bike into new ways. But on this topic, in the last 6 months, we get yesterday 2 million Swiss francs from. It's quite a lot of money around, and it helps us actually to a really great new platform. And it's not only an exhibition, it's actually a model where people can modeling, where people can build something. It's also kind of TED where we like to do interaction, and we are also planning to get in close contact with school classes to learn what they understand and how they think, and put this actually back into politics discussions and things like that. So it will be actually a spinning wheel that will start in spring 2023. Just to sum up, we have to clean in our front door, and then actually I use this topic as a new major topic for the Swiss Museum of Transport, and it gives me a modern platform to use it also in a kind of a business case for the Swiss Museum of Transport. So they are actually those 3 steps, and I'm really happy that I get the new infrastructure near soon. But I'm really, Katie did tell a lot of things. We have a model split at the moment of about 55% of our people, they're traveling by public transport. And we do a lot of combined tickets. There are a lot of things you can do. The low-hanging fruits are really low, and the more difficult one, I love the expression from Sam, to eat an elephant. It's actually, but I try to be important on this journey, but it has to be fun and gives new ideas and new way of thinking. That's actually what I have to tell you. I would love to invite you all next year to see how we're on the way. I would like to give back to Sam. Thank you.
Thanks, Martin. Could you just unshare your screen?
Of course.
That's great. It's a really brilliant example. I knew you were very active in this. I hadn't realized you'd taken it so far forward with your new project, your new building, a completely kind of holistic approach to your organization. That was really heartening. I do like the idea of cleaning the front step first. It's just that's very Swiss, but it's great. I think that's where we all need to be. Are there any questions for Martin before we move further on? Neil.
Thank you very much, Martin. That was fantastic. And I worked in Lucerne a few years ago. We were doing some work at the railway station. So if I'd known there was a museum just across the water, I would have been there most of my time. But it's a beautiful place, and sustainable is going to stick in my mind now. So that is a great tagline. So I suppose the issue, I think, or one of the things I was thinking of is in something. I mean, obviously you've got a really excellent program of work. Are you benchmarking your current carbon, and are you going to be monitoring that? Because I think you made the point. You've got all these things going, but I wasn't sure about the benchmarking. I may have missed that on the presentation.
Thanks, Neil, for this great question. Actually, to measure it actually is an important issue to involve also the employees. Actually, everybody can do something on a daily basis, but to say that we have a good measurement system at the moment would be actually wrong. We're still looking for visible things to have a thermometer or whatever, that maybe in the entrance hall, that we really can involve our 250 employees, not using paper cups, using and things like that. There are thousands of little things, and we have kind of award them, and we just put in place a kind of think tank, a blackboard where they can put their inputs. Even cleaning stuff can be an important part in less using of chemical things, and reuse mops and every and it has to. I try to keep it on a motivating, easygoing, on a not fun, but a level with a smile. You do something good for yourself and for the environment, and that's. But we have not a 100% calibrated measurement system at the moment.
Thanks, Peter Robinson. Hi, Peter.
Sam, if you'll allow me 2 minutes, I need to, I think, bring in to your news of developments from the industrial and mobile heritage sector, because the great challenge for those of us who, as far as we can see, will continue to need to use traditional fossil fuels for rail, road, sea, and I think also air heritage transport, certainly rail, road and sea, is that a new consortium platform is being developed under the title of the Working Industrial and Mobile Heritage. I am involved with this wearing two hats. One is with FedEx, the European Federation of Museum and Tourist Railways, and secondly with Europa Nostra, the Industrial and Engineering Heritage Committee, of which I'm the secretary. And we have started the progress of developing this last year. FedEx and FIVA, the Fédération Internationale de Véhicules Anciens, which covers all forms of road transport, are the project leaders. I think really this has definitely stirred me into saying that I think we should bring IATM into this dialogue. I'll probably ask my FedEx president, Jaap Nievecht, to have a word with Peter Paul sometime soon, but in more practical terms, we're developing an initial report on the moment on the challenge of still allowing limited use of traditional fossil fuels in order to effectively interpret not just trains and old cars, but in particular industrial heritage, pumping stations, etc., effectively. This obviously is combined with taking every other possible measure, as already outlined brilliantly this afternoon, to minimize emissions, etc., So this is work ongoing, but I will take up with my president, Jaap Nievecht, and others, extending an invitation to IATM to join us on this in this process.
Yeah, happy to join, Peter, and maybe we should do a meeting, a Zoom bringing together on of a number of players in this particular issue. Thanks. Yeah.
Very happy to do that, Sam. And but anyway, look, I'll start the ball rolling anyway, and more news later. I emphasize we've already started to talk to people like the Climate Change Network, Andrew Potts, who is one of the authors of the European Cultural Heritage Green Paper, sorry, and we're seeking recognition in future updates of that Green Paper for recognizing the modest needs for industrial mobile heritage while still being very responsible.
Yeah, indeed. One of the triumphs of Peter, I think, could you just turn your, can you mute?
I'll go to mute. Okay.
Yeah. We were really pleased that there's an exemption for the London ultra low emission zone for buses over a certain age, which kind of recognizes that there will always be, you know, some special cases around heritage. Yeah, we'll follow through with that. Thank you for raising it. I think we should move on. We were a little interrupted earlier, but we're now pushing time a little bit. It's my great pleasure to introduce a colleague of mine, Chi Onura, from our learning department. I thought it would be interesting for you to see a very specific instance of the museum reaching out to primary school in London during the lockdown on an online, on a virtual basis, and bringing together both business interests and school children in a what we describe as a takeover day. Chi, would you like to pick this up and share your slide?
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Sam. So I'm just going to share my slide, and hopefully everyone will be able to see this.
Got it. Yep.
Perfect. Thank you. So yes, thank you so much for the introduction, Sam. I'm Chi Onura, and I am the schools manager at London Transport Museum. So I'm going to be presenting a case study of our Kids in Museums live stream panel, which is part of our Climate Crossroads programme. And this is an example of our approach to communicating some key concepts linked to sustainability for children in schools. So in November 2021, as part of the Kids in Museums Takeover Day, London Transport Museum hosted a panel discussion webinar, which gave Year 5 students from a local primary school in London, Wembley Primary School, you can see them here, an opportunity to ask a panel of experts from the transport sector questions to get to the bottom of what are adults doing about the climate crisis and to save our planet, and what actions can we take ourselves? So what did this look like? We assembled a panel of 6 adults from TfL, Mott MacDonald, Cubic Transportation Systems, Sopra Steria, and worked with 16 children from Year 5 at Wembley Primary School. The children formulated their questions over a number of sessions with London Transport Museum's learning staff and through creative workshops. And on the day, we hosted a live stream to schools across London and beyond, where the children were able to put their environmental questions to the grown-ups. So this was a multi-layered project with a number of creative approaches that aim to explore with children and their teachers how they can start to create positive environmental change through their actions. The project explored change making on both a small individual scale as well as a larger scale by the children actually meeting adults in different roles in the cultural and transport sectors and exploring how they were creating change. The museum is passionate about working with schools to co-create learning experiences so that our outcomes really align with the needs of students and teachers in the current climate. So we made the content relatable for the students by localizing it. First of all, developing their understanding of how environmental issues impacted their local environments, before then scaling up to the bigger picture and the global picture. And an important aspect of the project was really empowering students to make them feel that their voices were important and they really could actually make a difference in building a greener future. And a key way this was achieved through the project was by facilitating the dialogue between the students and experts through this live stream digital event. So the live stream was a big finale of the whole project, and the momentum and the build up towards this special event allowed it to be really rich and really memorable and a cultural experience for those children taking part. So being involved in the Kids in Museums Takeover event alongside external organisations and staff took the project beyond the walls of the school. And the fact that this was a live stream into other schools to view contributed to the students' sense of pride and ownership over their work. And in addition, knowing that a recording would be available on YouTube, that was something that they could share with their friends, with their family, and with the further school community as well, which really reinforced the message that their voices were important and needed to be heard in the conversation on climate action. So this also contributed to the legacy of the project for the museum and partner organisations, and it continues to be a learning resource that we can direct educators and learners to. So the resulting discussion was rich and full of information, advice and actions that we could all take as individuals to start to make this positive environmental change on a very tangible and digestible level. So, as this event had quite a number of stakeholders, as you can see, there were teachers, there were students, and then our partners themselves. In the lead up to the event, we led a series of creative workshops, which were specially devised for students and teachers, as well as adult panelists. So, as far as we know, this was quite a unique event for many of our young learners, as this was the first time they'd interviewed someone, and indeed the first time they'd ever met external organisations and heard of a panel discussion as well. So outreach of this kind is typically directed for secondary school students, and even for many of our adult panelists, this was their first time working with primary schools too. So what did we learn? The key thing that became very clear to us early on in the project was that we really needed to work with the students and teachers to develop a clear understanding of vocabulary and concepts concerning climate science. As this is a developing field of science and that's not strongly embedded into the primary school curriculum, there was quite an important knowledge gap here that needed to be filled. And for us, this highlighted a clear role for the museum. So some of this terminology that we really needed to break down were words like carbon neutral, emissions, and sustainability. So having identified these knowledge gaps, we built a focus on vocabulary into the sessions we led with the students, though we were working with quite short timeframes. And if we were to do this project again, we definitely would devote a lot more time to unpacking the terminology even more. It was also important to consider the language used during the live stream, as we were really aware that those watching would also have differing levels of knowledge around these key themes. So with this in mind, we also took time to break down the job titles of our panelists to our students ahead of the event. So this included covering what an engineer is to what a sustainability strategist does. So this was also important because more insightful and engaging questions could be asked when students better understood the jobs of the adults on the panel. And this created an additional opportunity of exposing students to a variety of jobs in transport, tackling sustainability and building a greener future. So again, this area of outreach is normally reserved for secondary school students. So it was really exciting to be able to bring about these important topics with younger children and groups. So why are museums uniquely positioned to contribute to conversations on climate change? So as Sam has mentioned earlier on, museums are reliable, unbiased sources of information that people can trust. And climate science is a subject that's quite easily politicized and misunderstood. So it's important museums play a role in the conversation. And in particular, transport is an area that we can all understand and interact with on our daily lives. So it's really relatable for our audiences. Transport also has an important role to play in creating a sustainable planet. So it goes without saying that transport museums have an especially important role to play here, and that our programming can reach diverse audiences and empower their voices in the climate conversation. So we feel transport museums can share how simple changes to the way we travel can be inspired from past ingenuity, as well as paving the way to a greener city. So in regards to our project, it was really the strength and combination of the unique relationships held between the museum and the students that allowed us to widely engage young audiences and create a project that bridged a gap between those with power to make big changes and the young people to whom we will leave our planet. So, what are we doing next? So the success of the project has led us to consider how we can push what we've learned from this project further. So in October 2022, we'll be hosting a co-curated Climate Crossroads conference for Key Stage 4 and Key Stage 5 school students. This will be a thought leadership hackathon type event in October 2022 at the museum in Covent Garden, London, bringing together young people and businesses to examine and debate employability and the skills needed for building a greener future. Applying what we've learned from the Kids in Museums live stream, we plan to have a much longer lead-in time to the event, working with partner schools over 6 to 7 months to help shape the conference and demystify big concepts around sustainability and the future job market for young people. We plan to deliver a pre-conference workshops to equip young people as well as the businesses with the language required to have meaningful conversations that lead to tangible outcomes. So through the interactions between students and businesses at this conference, we hope to surface answers to the following. So what are young people's biggest concerns about the future of our planet? What skills do businesses need from the future employees to tackle the climate crisis? And how can we help young people develop those skills to enhance their employability? And how can businesses and young people come together to tackle the climate crisis? So we plan to also hold an environmental themed week for primary schools students, following the same format annually. And as well as having these big events at key moments of the year, we're also looking to integrate climate science throughout the sessions for primary and secondary school students, because we believe increasing the exposure to this crucial subject area through creative and immersive learning is really fundamental in building a greener future. So thank you very much for listening. That is the end of my short presentation on this case study. So I'll stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Chi. That was great to see the other end of the telescope from Martin's huge and ambitious and holistic project, to see a really simple but really well positioned piece of work with an unusually young age group in primary schools. Are there any questions for Chi?
Yeah, Sam?
Thank you, Martin. Yeah.
So, thank you, Chief, for your great presentation. It's a wonderful topic. I also like your frame, enjoyment to employment. Actually, is it possible to get some further documentation or the information, because it's absolutely the level we are also trying to implement much more, to work on a table, to do something together, and it was really a teaching lesson to see also where are the hidden problems with of understanding each other, to conversate on a certain level. I'm really impressed, and would like to learn more about this wonderful initiative.
Yes, absolutely. The museum has been really utilising its digital platforms, particularly since COVID, to try and raise these conversations. So I'd be very happy to kind of tell you a bit more about our work, and also share the range of resources and kind of videos and events like this that we've been doing, and share best practice from what we've been done. But Martin, I was also really, I found your presentation incredibly exciting, and I loved the concept of the kind of the house of the future was really exciting, and I really liked that too.
You're more than welcome after COVID to travel, and planning with Sam to exchange employees to learn from each other. That's already on the way, G. Okay.
Yep. Wes, your hand was up briefly. Has it come down again?
Yeah, just really to mention on that point, I mean, the Enjoyment to Employment programme has been a huge success from the coalition approach that we've been adopting, and much in the same way as Climate Crossroads, being able to bring our corporate partners into that coalition approach has been hugely valuable, not only from an investment perspective, but from all of the ideas and the people that are actually enabling us to deliver a lot of this work. So we've seen it, as Cheese just demonstrated through the presentation with the Kids Takeover event. It was great to have both the museum, our schools programme, and our industry partners all working together to address some of the bigger challenges that we're facing. So happy to share any information on that approach with you at any time.
Yeah, indeed. And I think the concept of enjoyment to employment came up because we realized a few years ago now that this is our museum is one which has a lot of families with young children in it, but we also began to appreciate that people's views of their preconceptions about a career actually happen much younger than we might have thought. So it's not a big gap between jumping on a bus and enjoying a train in a museum aged 5 or 6 or 7 and beginning to think about subjects and careers at 10, 11, 12. It's not, by the time you get to 17, the preconceptions are too well formed perhaps. So that little kind of the gap in years is much smaller perhaps than we had originally thought. So enjoyment to employment seeks to bridge that gap essentially. That was where it came from. Yeah. Okay. Anything else anyone wants to raise? Okay, let's wrap an eventful afternoon up at that point. I think we've all learned all sorts of things this afternoon, not least about the digital world and the problems of putting on live webinars. But thank you in particular to our speakers, to Neil, Katie, and Kim from McDonald, from Chi, and from Martin in Switzerland. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for sticking with an eventful afternoon. We must have a look at our own capacity in these type of areas for the future. The next one of these webinars is the 24th of February, when we're going to see behind the scenes from Budapest, where there's perhaps more going on in the rail and transport heritage world than anywhere else in the European museum scene, with a huge new transport museum, the restoration of a 19th century railway station, and a Gantz foundry that's been taken on by the museum guys in. So we're going to hear from Gabor in Budapest on the 24th of February, and then 24th of March we go to Berlin, and we get given a guided tour of a new exhibition in the Berlin Communications Museum called Back to the Future. An edited version of these webinars is available. The link is on the IATM website, and we'll circulate this one when we've edited out about 10 minutes somewhere earlier on, and let you have the link to that. So thank you very much. Good to see you, and thank you for sticking with the afternoon. And we'll see you again, we hope, next month. Thank you, and bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.